when we ask the question, what would it be like to be in a different life or to be happy? If instead of getting on your cell phone or instead of getting on your social media or instead of turning on the TV or instead of calling a friend and instead of doing something to distract you from that possible answer, if you sat with it long enough and that creative center turned on, it would naturally scan the whole entire landscape of the brain because it's the CEO, it's the symphony leader, it has connections to all parts of the brain. And it's going to look out over the landscape of the brain and look at the knowledge you've learned and the experiences that are stitched in your brain that are associated with what you know to answer that question. And as it calls up these different networks of neurons, once the brain fires in tandem, you get an image or a picture in your mind, and that's called intention. You see a new possibility, right? So then, this is why I am passionate about what we're doing. I never thought, Rangan, that I would see the kind of changes in people's physical health that I've seen in the last 2 years. Now, people do the best with what they think is available. If you don't know that this is possible, you are going to make the same choice. And that may be relying on some pharmaceutical, something outside of you, some therapy, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. But if your response hasn't changed in your life, the efficacy of whatever you're doing is going to be diminished. Okay, so once I now know that people could heal from different health conditions, and there's evidence in the science and there's evidence in testimony, like the person that you just recited, that's one of many, many people that have had that experience. When they stand on the stage at our week-long retreats, and we call them up. Why do I call them up on the stage? Because they are speaking the truth. They are the example of truth. And I want people to become aware of that possibility. Why? Because if you're unaware of it, it doesn't exist for you. Consciousness is awareness, right? And so then with consciousness, you can't have consciousness without energy. So that thought of another possibility is a different energy. It's a different possibility. And so now, once you know it's possible, then, okay, now let's get down to stepping in the footprints that other people have left behind. Why? If you're telling the story of your past every single day and 50% of that isn't even the truth, then you're reliving a miserable life that you never even had, all for the reason to excuse yourself from change. Stop telling the story of your past and start telling the story of your future. Stop romancing your past and start romancing your future. Why not fall in love with your future as much as you've fallen in love with your past? If I do this as an experiment, and you're scientifically minded, make your life the experiment. Make your life the experiment. Okay, I'm going to be uncomfortable if I start making different choices. Okay, but I'm not going to white knuckle it and stay in this unknown. No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work on making my brain work better. Let's work on making my heart work better. Let's put the whole thing together and let's practice. Yeah. And so then in the beginning, if it doesn't happen in 2 days, most people quit. Why? Because Amazon Prime can deliver to your door in a day, and you're used to that kind of entitlement of convenience. Creating really and making change, if it took you 5 years to develop this health condition, it may take you a little time to uncreate it. But what you're looking for is those small, subtle shifts in your life and in your body. Once you start seeing those changes take place, now you're more invested. And you can't believe in a new future without believing in yourself. And you can't believe in yourself without believing in a new future. You have to choose yourself every single day. So the person when the drugs and everything else wasn't working, they were their own resource, and they understood that this was their medicine. And so every day they said, how did I do at the end of my day? When did I fall from grace? When did I go unconscious? When did I return back to the old me? Let me rehearse it. Tomorrow I want to evolve my experience. And it was no longer about healing. It was about changing. And they stand on the stage and they say, oh God, I just realized that I have to work on this more with my eyes open. I have to stay in this emotional state. I have to keep the vision alive in my mind. And it's so much easier to forget that vision of your future than to remember it. And it takes repetition and practice. And there is a very strong change that goes on when people start making the effort. So simple thing to do, wake up in the morning before you reach for your cell phone, ask yourself, who do I no longer want to be? Let me write down the thoughts today. Let me become so conscious of this is horrible, I hate my life. Let's just stop that thought, because that thought is going to produce a chemical that's going to signal your body to feel a certain way. Let's become aware of how I behave. Write down 2 behaviors. Do I complain? Do I blame? Do I rush? Write them down and just commit them. Review them in your mind. What emotions do I want to no longer feel today, or at least stay conscious of? Do I feel sadness? Do I feel suffering? Do I feel fear? Do I feel anxiety? Let me just become conscious of those. And if I start feeling that, I just want to become aware and see if I can change it. Okay, what do I want to change to? When I feel that, let me think this way. Let me review that. Let me review how I'm going to behave. Let me rehearse it in my mind. Let me teach my body emotionally. I want to be able to feel this feeling over and over again so well. I'll keep practice feeling it till I can feel it on command. Wow. Now that's greatness. That's getting out of the bleachers and getting on the playing field. And it's not going to be a linear process. But catching yourself, and when it matters the most is when it's the hardest. That's when it matters the most.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wonderful, right? Wonderful hearing you speak with such passion. I love that idea that we should be our own experiment, because what I'm hearing is, listen, there's no side effects there. Well, there's no negative side effects there. Try it, right? Try it. There's no downside to trying to change the way that you think and practicing it and developing it like a skill. And I think that's the thing for me. This is a skill that you can practice, you can get better at. Just as if you get, you practice running, you may get faster and run for further distances. Well, let's also practice thinking in a different way. So I thought that was really important for people to have in the front of their minds. I practice on myself. I am in my early 40s and genuinely have never felt this good, Dr. Joe. Calm, content, happy. I know I'm responsible for my emotions and my thoughts. So I've now trained probably over 5 or 6 years to get to the point now where external events I don't allow them anymore to influence my state. And what you said about it not being linear. Yeah, I have a daily practice, a morning routine, which has a bit of meditation, a bit of breath work, a bit of positive mindsets. And you just keep showing up. You keep doing it. And then before you know it, you're in some sort of you're in a situation in life that previously you would have found incredibly stressful and gone on a negative, just like this negative mindset afterwards, which would have led to all kinds of compensatory behaviors. And you're like, oh, wow, I didn't react to that. I could see that big space between stress and response. And I want to be respectful to your time, but I'd love to just briefly cover meditation and brain waves if you had time, because I think, again, it's really helpful for people to understand that.
Okay, well, let's demystify it. I looked it up. I looked up the symbol. What does that symbol that represents meditation mean? And the actual translation of the word means to become familiar with. That's what it means. So then when you become conscious of your unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, and become familiar with them, if you can become so conscious that you don't go unconscious and you're facing off with your old self, and you have those thoughts, you're in a meditation, that's a good thing, right? And if you can fire and wire the new thoughts and rehearse the new behaviors and practice trading the chemicals of survival for elevated emotions, and you keep practicing those heart-centered emotions, they'll begin to become familiar to you. So breaking the habit of the old self and reinventing the new self, unlearning and relearning is the model of change, okay? But when you're living in stress and you're living in survival and the brain is aroused, what we're doing when we lost control or we can't predict what's going to happen is we try to control and predict everything in our life. And the arousal of the stress hormones causes our brain to move in these brainwave states called high beta. Now, we're talking right now, and we're in low-level beta. We're in beta, and beta is conscious awareness. We're aware that we're local in a body. We're occupying a body in space and time, in an environment and time, and the sensory system is picking up all this vital information through our senses from the environment. And beta brainwaves happen to create coherence between our inner world and our outer world. No problem there. If I said, "Oh, there'll be a dinner tonight, and I'm going to invite you. There'll be 10 people there, and please just remember all their names." Your brain would kind of pick up into like a mid-range beta state. It's not a bad stress. It's just that you got to get a little bit, the light bulb gets a little brighter. You got to get a little bit more aware, a little bit more awake. But when you're frustrated, when you're angry, when you're impatient, when you're resentful, when you're fearful, you're in these high beta brainwave patterns. And then that high beta is the alarm, it's the alert, it's emergency, there's a threat, there's a danger. So we shift our attention from one person, to another problem, to another meeting, to another thing, to another place, to the past. And every one of those circuits in our brain that are associated with everything we know in our life starts to light up out of order, like a lightning storm in the cloud, because our attention is shifting. Turns out the brain starts firing very incoherently, and we over-focus on things. Why? Because we don't want them to happen again. And so the arousal causes this incoherence in the brain, and when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. And the person in survival, the primitive system is saying, focus on matter, narrow your focus on the danger, focus on something material. And why does that happen? Because the senses heighten and we become materialists. So you're not going to be thinking about anything else if something's rustling in the bushes and it's dark. You're going to pay attention to that, right? So this kind of habituation of narrowing our focus or over-focusing becomes the common way people think when they're in survival. They think that's focus. So we said, okay, how are we going to teach people how to change waves? So what if they go from a narrow focus and focusing on objects in the material world to broadening their focus, or creating a divergent focus instead of a convergent focus, and opening their focus and focusing on nothing but space, nothing known, nothing material. And the act of sensing space tends to slow the brain waves down and start to suppress the analytical mind. When you're in survival, you're in stress, you're overly analytical. And our research shows that if you're analyzing yourself and you're analyzing the problems in your life within that aroused emotional state, 100% of the time you'll make your brain worse. You'll drive it further into those high beta states. And that's like driving your sports car in first gear on the freeway. It just won't work in time. So as you broaden your focus and you sense nothing, the acts of sensing and feeling cause you to stop analyzing and thinking, and your brain waves start to go down into a slower brainwave state, and you get past the analytical mind and you move into what's called alpha brainwaves. Now, alpha brainwaves, in beta, your outer world is more real than your inner world. In alpha, your inner world starts becoming more real than the outer world, and the voice in your head, that default that's talking to you all the time, tends to shut off, and the brain starts to imagine. It starts to see in images and pictures. That's alpha. It's an imaginary state. It's a creative state. But when you're sensing space, what happens that's so unique is those different compartments of the brain that were subdivided when the person is sensing space not only moves into alpha, the brain starts to synchronize. The different communities of neurons that were firing out of order start to resonate in coherence and order, and the front of the brain is starting to resonate with both sides of the brain, and all of a sudden you're seeing more community of neurons coming together, and what syncs in the brain links in the brain. Now, when the person has coherent alpha brainwave patterns, now all of a sudden the brain becomes more integrated, and they can start to hold an image and focus or dream or imagine. We all do this when we're driving in the car on the freeway, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. But then if you can get your body to relax even further so that it's in a light sleep, that it feels so safe that it could actually rest in a light sleep while you're conscious and awake, relaxed and awake, you're in a brainwave pattern called theta. Now, in theta, lights go out in the thinking neocortex. The memory bank, the autobiographical self, is literally shut off. Your connection to the environment, to your body and to time, literally changes. If lights go out on the neocortex, then you get beyond your identity. And we see then, when a person's in theta, the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open to information. And when you get beyond the analytical mind, then you open door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. That's what separates it, the analytical mind. Now you're suggestible to the information. You're in a hypnotic state, and you can rewrite a program. You can rewrite a new script. You can change the way you behave. You can change the way you can reprogram yourself to do something differently. And you can't do it in high beta because you're not in the operating system. You got to get beyond the conscious mind into the subconscious mind to rewrite those programs. So teaching people how to regulate.